The dust storm caught her 3 miles outside of Eureka, Nevada, and by the time Lily Carson stumbled into town that scorching August afternoon in 1882, she looked more like a ghost than a woman. Her dress, once a modest gray calico, hung torn at the hem where she had caught it on barbed wire 2 days back, and her face bore the exhaustion of someone who had walked through hell itself. The few townspeople on the main street paused to stare as she made her way toward the general store, her steps uneven, her shoulders sagging under the weight of a battered carpet bag that held everything she owned in this world. Inside the cool dimness of Harper's General Store, Lily leaned against the counter, trying to catch her breath. The proprietor, a heavy-set man with suspicious eyes, looked her up and down with the kind of judgment she had grown accustomed to over the past 6 months. "Help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting he doubted she could afford anything in his establishment. "Water, please," Lily managed, her throat raw from the dust. "And if you know of anyone looking for help, a cook, a cleaner, anything." Mr. Harper filled a tin cup from a barrel and slid it across the counter. She drank it too quickly, choking a little, then wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. He studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "You running from something?" "No, sir. Just looking for honest work." "You got references?" Lily set down the cup carefully. This was always the hardest part. "I worked for the Patterson family in Carson City for 2 years. Before that, the Wilsons in Sacramento." "Why'd you leave?" She could lie. She had tried that in the last 3 towns, and somehow the truth always caught up with her anyway. Better to be honest and face the rejection head-on than to settle in only to be driven out weeks later. "Mrs. Patterson took ill last winter. Cancer. She needed constant care, and I stayed with her until the end. After she passed, Mr. Patterson's sister came to take over the household. She had her own people and did not need me." Lily paused, gathering her courage. "Before that, I left the Wilsons because their son came home from college and made it clear my presence was not appropriate. Mrs. Wilson chose to believe him over me." Mr. Harper's expression grew colder. "So you are the kind that causes trouble." "I am the kind that trouble finds," Lily said quietly. "But I am also a hard worker, Mr. Harper. I can clean, cook, sew, keep books if needed. I can work from dawn until midnight if that is what is required. I just need a chance. Plenty of folks need chances. Cannot help everyone who wanders through here." Lily felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came with every door closing in her face. She reached for her carpet bag. "Thank you for the water, sir. Hold on now." A woman's voice came from behind a shelf stacked with dry goods. A moment later, Mrs. Harper emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She was thin where her husband was broad, with keen eyes that seemed to see more than her husband's suspicious glare. "Henry, stop being such a mule. The girl is clearly desperate." "Not our problem, Martha." "Maybe not, but Christian charity is supposed to mean something." Mrs. Harper turned to Lily. "The minister's wife might need help. Reverend Paulson's wife just had their 4th baby and she has been run ragged. Cannot pay much, but it would be room and board and a few dollars a month." It was not much, but it was more than Lily had now. She nodded eagerly. "I would be grateful for the introduction, madam." Mrs. Harper led her out of the store and down the dusty street toward a white clapboard church at the edge of town. The parsonage next to it was small but tidy, with a struggling garden out front fighting against the Nevada heat. Mrs. Harper knocked briskly, and after a moment, the door opened to reveal a harried-looking woman with a baby on her hip and flower in her hair. The arrangement was made quickly. Mrs. Paulson was too exhausted to ask many questions, and Lily moved into the tiny room off the kitchen that same afternoon. For 3 weeks, she worked harder than she ever had in her life, caring for the baby and 3 other children under the age of 6, cooking meals, washing endless loads of laundry in the yard, and collapsing into her narrow bed each night too tired to dream. She might have been content there, or at least resigned to her situation, if not for the arrival of Mrs. Paulson's sister from Salt Lake City. The sister took one look at Lily, young and reasonably pretty despite her exhaustion, and began asking questions. Where had she come from? Why was she alone? What had happened to her family? Lily answered honestly. Her parents had died of fever when she was 16. She had no siblings, no husband, no close relations. She had been working her way from household to household ever since, trying to save enough to perhaps open a small boarding house of her own someday. The sister's expression grew tight with disapproval. A young woman alone like this, it is not natural, it is not proper. There must be some reason no one has taken her in permanently. She is a good worker, Mrs. Paulson protested weakly, but Lily could see her resolve crumbling under her sister's judgment. That night over dinner, Reverend Paulson cleared his throat uncomfortably. Miss Carson, my wife's sister has raised some concerns. Not that we have any complaints about your work, you understand. You have been a tremendous help. But perhaps it would be better if you found a situation more suited to a young woman in your circumstances. More suited how? Lily asked, though she already knew. Perhaps with a family that has older women in the household, or a boarding house where there are many eyes. You understand how people talk. She understood perfectly. She was young, unmarried, and unattached. Her very existence made people uncomfortable. She was a reminder that bad things could happen to good people, that families could be torn apart, that a woman could end up alone through no fault of her own. And rather than feel compassion, people found it easier to assume something must be wrong with her. Lily packed her carpetbag the next morning and left before the children woke up. She could not bear to say goodbye to them, especially little Emma, who had taken to following her around the house like a duckling. She tried the boarding house next, but Mrs. Sullivan, who ran it, said she already had help. She tried the hotel, but the manager looked her up and down in a way that made her skin crawl and suggested an arrangement that had nothing to do with cleaning rooms. She tried 3 of the larger houses on the prosperous side of town, but the doors were closed politely but firmly in her face. By late afternoon, Lily found herself sitting on a bench outside the saloon, trying not to cry. A few cowhands coming off shift gave her curious looks as they passed, and she knew she needed to move before someone got the wrong idea about why she was sitting there. But she was so tired. Tired of walking, tired of rejection, tired of carrying her burden of loneliness and bad luck from town to town like a stone in her pocket. I am a burden everywhere I go, she whispered to herself, not realizing she had spoken aloud until a shadow fell across her. Lily looked up to find a man standing before her, tall and solid as a barn beam, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his work shirt. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from the Nevada mountains themselves, all strong lines and sharp angles, but his eyes were surprisingly gentle. "Pardon me for overhearing," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. "But that is a heavy thing to say about yourself, miss." Lily straightened, embarrassed to have been caught in such a moment of weakness. "I apologize, I was just thinking aloud. Nothing to apologize for." He removed his hat, revealing more of that dark hair. "Name is Fletcher Stone. I have got a ranch about 8 miles northeast of here. Came into town for supplies and heard you have been looking for work." "You heard about me?" Lily felt her stomach sink. If her reputation had already spread, she might as well leave Eureka altogether. "Mrs. Harper mentioned you to my foreman when he was in the store this morning. Said you were a hard worker looking for an honest situation. Fletcher's gaze was direct, but not unkind. I am in need of someone who can cook for my ranch hands and keep the house in order. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, passed away 2 months back, and we have been making do with whatever the hands can throw together. It is not pretty. You want to hire me, even though I am young and alone and apparently the kind of person who causes concern wherever she goes. Something flickered in Fletcher's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. I want to hire someone who can cook something other than burnt beans and can keep my house from falling into complete chaos. Mrs. Harper said you could do both. That true? Yes, sir. I am a good cook and a thorough housekeeper. Then I do not care what anyone else thinks. I need help and you need work. Seems straightforward to me. He settled his hat back on his head. Room and board plus $20 a month. You would have your own quarters separate from the main house. There are 6 hands who work the ranch full-time and you would be cooking for all of us. It is hard work but honest. Lily stood slowly, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You are serious. You are offering me a position. I am offering you a job, Miss Carson. What you make of it is up to you. She wanted to accept immediately, but painful experience had taught her to be cautious. Mr. Stone, I appreciate the offer, but I should be honest with you about my situation. I have worked for several families over the past few years, and none of those situations has lasted. Not because I did poor work, but because my presence makes people uncomfortable. I am alone in the world, and that makes people suspicious. They think there must be something wrong with me, some scandal or shame that explains why I have no family, no husband, no one to vouch for me. If you hire me, people will talk. They may think poorly of you. Fletcher was quiet for a moment, his gaze steady on her face. Then he did something unexpected. He reached out and took her hand, his palm warm and calloused from years of ranch work, and held it gently between both of his. Then burden me, he said simply. I am strong. The words hit Lily like a physical blow, knocking the breath from her lungs. In all her years of struggle, of apologizing for her existence, of trying to make herself smaller and less troublesome, no one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever looked at her circumstances and said, in effect, that she was worth the trouble. Mr. Stone, she managed, her voice shaking slightly. My wagon is loaded up at the livery. We can head out whenever you are ready. He released her hand but continued to look at her with that same steady, unshakable calm. Unless you have other prospects you are considering. No, Lily said quickly. No other prospects. I accept your offer, Mr. Stone, and I promise you will not regret it. I do not make promises I cannot keep, Miss Carson, and I would advise you to do the same. Just do the work and we will get along fine. The ride out to the Stone Ranch took just over an hour in Fletcher's sturdy wagon, and Lily spent most of it stealing glances at her new employer while trying not to appear obvious about it. He was not particularly talkative, but when he did speak, it was to point out landmarks or mention something practical about the ranch. He had inherited it from his father 5 years ago, he told her. Run about 300 head of cattle, some horses. The work was hard but steady, and his men were decent sorts who would treat her respectfully or answer to him. You have got a foreman? Lily asked, remembering he had mentioned one. Sam Ortega. Good man. Been with me since my father's time. He keeps the hands in line and knows cattle better than anyone I have ever met. Fletcher glanced at her briefly. He has got a wife and 3 kids. They live in one of the cabins on the property. You will meet Maria soon enough. She has been doing her best to help with the cooking, but she has got her hands full with her own family. The ranch appeared on the horizon as they crested a ridge, and Lily felt her breath catch slightly. It was not large by some standards, but it was more substantial than she had expected. The main house was a sprawling single-story structure built of wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around at least two sides. Behind it stood a large barn, several outbuildings, a bunkhouse for the hands, and two smaller cabins that must be for the foreman's family and her own quarters. The land itself stretched out in rolling hills dotted with sage and scrub brush, with mountains rising in the purple distance. There was a wildness to it, a sense of space and possibility that made something in Lily's chest loosen for the first time in months. Fletcher pulled the wagon up to the main house, and immediately several men emerged from various buildings. They were dusty and tired-looking, clearly at the end of a long day's work, but they brightened visibly when they saw Fletcher had returned. "Boss," one of them called. "Please tell me you brought real food from town. Better than that, brought someone who can cook real food." Fletcher climbed down from the wagon and came around to help Lily down, his hands steady at her waist as he lifted her to the ground. "Everyone, this is Miss Carson. She will be taking over as housekeeper and cook. Miss Carson, these disreputable characters are my ranch hands." Over the next few minutes, Lily was introduced to a bewildering array of names and faces. There was Sam Ortega, the foreman, a compact man with intelligent eyes and a quiet authority about him. His wife Maria appeared from one of the cabins, a plump woman with a warm smile who looked instantly relieved to see Lily. The hands included young Tommy Wright, who could not have been more than 19. Grizzled old Pete Summers, who claimed to have been cowboying since before the war, and several others whose names Lily knew she would mix up for the first few days. "Your quarters are this way," Fletcher said, picking up her carpet bag before she could protest. He led her to the smaller of the two cabins, which turned out to be a neat single-room structure with a bed, a small stove, a table, and a rocking chair by the window. It was simple but clean, and to Lily, who had spent the last few nights sleeping in a tiny room that barely fit her cot, it looked like luxury. "Mrs. Chen's things have been packed away," Fletcher said, setting her bag on the bed. "Maria can help you get settled if you need anything. We have been eating at 6, but you set whatever schedule works for the kitchen. The hands will adjust. 6 is fine," Lily said quickly. "That gives me time to prepare properly." She turned to face him, suddenly aware that they were alone in the small cabin. "Mr. Stone, I want to thank you again for this opportunity. I will work hard to prove myself worthy of your trust." Fletcher's expression remained neutral, but there was something in his eyes that might have been approval. "Like I said, just do the work. That is all I ask." He moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. The hands are good men, but they are still men. You get any trouble from anyone, you come to me directly. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Not sir, just Fletcher. We do not stand on ceremony much out here." After he left, Lily sank down on the bed and looked around her new home. It was not much, but it was hers. For now, at least. She allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to rest, then stood and began unpacking her few possessions. There would be time for exhaustion later. Right now, she had a kitchen to inspect and a dinner to plan. The main house kitchen turned out to be surprisingly well equipped. Mrs. Chen, whoever she had been, had clearly taken pride in her domain. The stove was a good one, the pots and pans were well maintained, and the pantry, while picked over, still had the basics. Maria came by as Lily was taking inventory and offered to show her where everything was stored. "I am so glad you are here," Maria said warmly. "I have been trying to help, but with my 3 little ones and Sam needing me to keep the books for the ranch, I have been stretched thin. The men have been understanding, but I know they are tired of burnt biscuits and watery stew." "I will do my best," Lily promised. "Though tonight might be simple while I figure out the kitchen." Simple sounds wonderful compared to what they have been eating. Lily managed to pull together a respectable dinner of fried beef, potatoes, greens from the struggling garden that Maria tended, and fresh biscuits. When she rang the dinner bell that hung outside the kitchen door, the men came practically running. They crowded into the dining room, a large space dominated by a rough-hewn table that could easily seat a dozen, and fell on the food like starving wolves. Fletcher arrived last, having cleaned up and changed his shirt. He took his place at the head of the table and watched with what might have been amusement as his men devoured Lily's cooking. "Miss Carson," Pete said through a mouthful of biscuit, "if you cook like this regular, I might actually start putting on weight again." "These potatoes are not burnt," Tommy added wonderingly. "I forgot potatoes could not be burnt." "All right, you bunch of complainers," Fletcher said mildly. "Let the woman eat her own dinner before you talk her ear off." Lily had set a place for herself at the far end of the table, but she found herself too nervous to eat much. Instead, she watched the men and tried to learn their dynamics. Sam, the foreman, ate steadily while keeping an eye on everyone, clearly accustomed to managing this crew. Pete and another older hand named Dutch swapped stories about cattle drives they had worked in their youth. Tommy hung on every word, his inexperience obvious in his eagerness. And Fletcher presided over it all with quiet authority, saying little but missing nothing. Lily found her gaze drawn to him repeatedly throughout the meal, studying the way he listened when his men spoke, the slight nod he gave when Sam mentioned a fence that needed mending, the patience in his expression when Tommy accidentally knocked over his water glass. After dinner, the men drifted off to the bunkhouse or their own pursuits, and Lily began clearing the table. She was elbow-deep in dishwater when Fletcher appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Leave those," he said. "You have done enough for your first day." "I am almost finished," Lily replied. "And I want to prepare dough for tomorrow's bread before I turn in." Fletcher leaned against the door frame, watching her work. "You always this stubborn." "I prefer to think of it as thorough. Mrs. Chen used to say something similar." His voice carried a note of memory, not quite sadness, but something close. "She worked for my father for 20 years, then stayed on when I took over, died in her sleep one night, peaceful as anything. She was nearly 70 years old and still insisted on getting up before dawn to start breakfast." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was. This place has not felt right since she passed." Fletcher straightened. "But I meant what I said. Leave the rest for tomorrow. You have had a long day." Lily dried her hands and turned to face him. "May I ask you something, Mr. Stone?" "Fletcher, I mean." "Go ahead." "Why did you hire me? You could have any number of women in Eureka who would take this position. Women with families and reputations. Women who would not come with the kind of questions I bring with me." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes steady on hers. "You want the honest answer, please. Because when I saw you sitting on that bench outside the saloon, looking like you had reached the end of your rope, you reminded me of my sister." Lily had not expected that. "Your sister?" "Sarah. She died 6 years ago before my father passed. She had married a man from California, someone she met when he came through on business. He seemed decent enough, so my father gave his blessing. She moved out to Sacramento with him, and at first the letters she sent were happy." Fletcher's jaw tightened. "Then they got shorter. Then they stopped coming altogether. By the time my father and I made the trip out there, she had been dead for 3 months. Influenza, her husband said, but the neighbors told a different story. He had been a drunk and mean with it. Beat her, isolated her from anyone who might help. When she got sick, he did not even call for a doctor." "I am so sorry," Lily said softly. She was alone out there, surrounded by people who might have helped if she had asked, but she was too proud or too scared to reach out. and no one reached out to her because she was married, and that made her someone else's problem. Fletcher met Lily's gaze directly. "So when I heard you were in town looking for work, and Mrs. Harper mentioned you had been turned away from half a dozen places because people found your situation uncomfortable, I thought about Sarah. About how maybe if someone had given her a chance, offered her a way out, things might have ended differently." "I am not your sister," Lily said gently. "No, you are not. But you needed help and I needed a housekeeper. Sometimes things work out simply because they are supposed to." After Fletcher left, Lily finished tidying the kitchen and made her way back to her cabin. The night was cool, a relief after the scorching heat of the day, and the sky was so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. She stood outside her door for a few minutes, breathing in the sage-scented air and listening to the distant sound of cattle settling for the night. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Lily felt something that might have been hope. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost comfortable. Lily rose before dawn to start breakfast, served the men at 6, cleaned the house while they worked the ranch, prepared a hearty lunch at noon, and then spent the afternoon baking bread, mending clothes, or tending the struggling garden that she was determined to revive. Supper at 6 was followed by evening cleanup, and then she would retreat to her cabin, exhausted but satisfied with the day's work. The men treated her with careful respect, aware that Fletcher would tolerate no nonsense. Even Pete, who had a reputation for coarse language, watched his mouth in her presence. Tommy was painfully polite, calling her Miss Carson and practically tripping over himself to carry heavy pots for her. Sam's wife, Maria, became a friend, stopping by the kitchen most afternoons to chat while Lily worked and their children played in the yard. And Fletcher was a steady, solid presence throughout it all. He worked alongside his men during the day, mending fences and moving cattle and breaking horses, but he always appeared at mealtimes, quietly appreciative of Lily's cooking. Sometimes in the evenings, she would see him on the porch of the main house, going over ledgers or simply sitting and watching the sun go down over his land. Lily tried not to think about how often her gaze sought him out, or how her heartbeat quickened slightly when he entered a room. She was his employee, nothing more. He had hired her out of kindness and need, not because he felt anything for her beyond the basic decency he would show any person in distress. To read anything more into his actions would be foolish and dangerous. But then, there would be moments that made her wonder. Like the afternoon he found her struggling to reach a high shelf in the pantry, stretching up on her toes and still coming up short. He appeared behind her without warning, his arm extending past her shoulder to retrieve the jar she needed. And for a brief second, she was intensely aware of his presence, the warmth of him at her back, the smell of leather and sage and clean sweat. "Thank you," she managed, taking the jar with hands that shook slightly. "We can move things around if the shelves are too high," Fletcher said, apparently oblivious to her reaction. "No, it is fine. I can manage." Or the evening when a late-season storm rolled through, violent and sudden, and Fletcher appeared at her cabin door just as the first drops began to fall. "Just checking to make sure you have everything you need," he said, water already darkening his hat and shoulders. "These storms can last all night sometimes." "I am fine," Lily assured him, though in truth the wind was beginning to howl in a way that made the little cabin feel very small and vulnerable. "You should get to the main house before you are soaked through." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating Fletcher's face in harsh white light. "You are sure you are all right out here? You could come to the main house if you would feel safer." "I am sure." She was not really, but she could not impose on him any more than she already had. It is just a storm. Fletcher nodded slowly, then touched his hat and headed back into the growing tempest. Lily closed the door and leaned against it, listening to the wind and rain and trying not to think about how much she had wanted to say yes, to follow him to the main house and sit by the fire while the storm raged outside. A month into her employment, a problem arose that threatened everything. It started when a man named Robert Shaw rode into the ranch one afternoon, introducing himself as a cattle buyer from Carson City. He was expensively dressed, with slicked back hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Fletcher invited him to stay for dinner, as hospitality demanded, and Lily prepared the best meal she could manage on short notice. Shaw was loud and forward, dominating the conversation at dinner with stories of his business successes and his opinions on everything from cattle prices to politics. The ranch hands bore it with the stoic patience of men accustomed to enduring unwelcome guests. But Lily noticed Fletcher growing quieter as the meal progressed, his jaw tight. When Lily began clearing plates, Shaw turned his attention to her for the first time. "And who is this lovely creature?" he asked, his gaze traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Fletcher, you sly dog, you have been holding out on me." "Miss Carson is my housekeeper," Fletcher said, his tone flat and hard. "Is that right? And where did you find such a pretty little housekeeper?" Shaw's smile widened. "She looks familiar. Have we met before, darling?" "I do not believe so, sir," Lily said, keeping her voice polite but distant. "Carson, Carson." Shaw tapped his chin theatrically. "There was a scandal in Carson City last year, was there not? Something about a young woman and accusations against a prominent family's son. What was her name? Carson, if I recall correctly." The room went silent. Lily felt her face drain of blood. "That is enough," Fletcher said, his voice low and dangerous. "I am just making conversation," Shaw protested innocently. "Surely if the girl has nothing to hide, she does not mind a few questions. Tell me, Miss Carson, why exactly did you leave Carson City?" Lily set down the plates she was holding with careful precision, her hands trembling. "I left because my employer's son made advances toward me that I did not welcome. When I refused him, he told his mother that I had been the one to behave inappropriately. Mrs. Patterson believed her son over me, naturally, and I was dismissed without references. The Pattersons are a prominent family, and the son's name had to be protected, so the story that circulated was that I had attempted to entrap him. I came to Eureka to escape that reputation, Mr. Shaw. I have done nothing wrong, but I have been punished for it nonetheless." Shaw's smile never wavered. "That is your version of events. It is the truth. Then why did half a dozen families in Carson City refuse to employ you after you left the Pattersons? Because lies travel faster than truth, and a young woman's word means nothing against a wealthy man's son." Fletcher stood abruptly, his chair scraping back loudly. "Mr. Shaw, I think you should leave." "Leave? But Fletcher, I thought we had business to discuss." "We have nothing to discuss. I do not do business with men who insult my household." "You can ride back to Carson City tonight or sleep in the barn. Those are your options." Shaw's false charm evaporated, replaced by cold anger. "You are choosing some questionable girl over a lucrative business arrangement." "I am choosing to trust my own judgment about people's character over gossip and innuendo. Miss Carson has worked for me for over a month now. She has been nothing but professional and hardworking. You, on the other hand, have been in my house for less than 3 hours, and you have already shown yourself to be a bully and a coward." Shaw stood, his face red. "You are making a mistake, Stone. When word gets out that you are harboring that girl, your reputation will suffer. People will start asking questions about what exactly goes on out here. Let them ask. I know the truth, and so does everyone who works for me. Now get out." After Shaw left, the dining room remained silent. The ranch hands shifted uncomfortably, and Lily stood frozen by the sideboard, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "Miss Carson," Fletcher said quietly, "would you step outside with me for a moment, please?" Lily followed him onto the porch, her heart pounding. This was it. He was going to tell her that she had to leave, that she had brought exactly the kind of trouble he did not need, and he would be right to do so. She had tried to warn him, had told him that her presence would cause problems, but he had not believed her. Fletcher walked to the edge of the porch and stood looking out at the darkening sky. "I am sorry you had to endure that." "I am the one who should apologize," Lily said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "You took a chance on me, and now I have brought scandal to your door, just like I warned you I would. I will leave first thing in the morning." "Leave?" Fletcher turned to stare at her. "Why would you leave?" "Because Mr. Shaw will spread his poison. He will tell everyone he knows about my past, and it will damage your reputation. You will be seen as foolish for hiring me, or worse. People will believe there is something inappropriate happening here. I cannot let that happen. You have been too kind to me. Let me get this straight. You think I want you to leave because some pompous ass from Carson City tried to intimidate you with old gossip." "It is not gossip if it is true," Lily said quietly. "The facts are accurate, even if the interpretation is wrong. I was dismissed from the Patterson household under scandalous circumstances. That is true. I did have trouble finding work afterward. Also true. And I am young and unmarried and living on your ranch. People will talk. Let them talk." "You do not understand what it is like," Lily said, frustrated tears finally spilling over. "You are a man, a landowner, someone with standing in the community. Your reputation can weather a scandal. Mine cannot. And if people believe there is something improper between us, I am the one who will be called a harlot and a home wrecker. Never mind that you are not even married and there is nothing happening between us. That is just how it works." Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed the distance between them and took her gently by the shoulders. "You are right. I do not fully understand what it is like to be judged so harshly for circumstances beyond your control. But I understand enough to know that it is not fair, and it is not right, and I will not contribute to it by sending you away because some fool thinks he can bully me with gossip." "But your reputation," Lily protested weakly. "My reputation will survive. And if it does not, then I have learned something about who my real friends are." His hands were warm through the thin fabric of her dress, steady and reassuring. "You are not leaving, Lily, not unless you want to, which is different." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it made her breath catch. "I do not want to leave," she admitted, "but I do not want to be a burden to you either." "Then burden me," Fletcher said, echoing his words from that first day in town. "I am strong enough to carry it. And more to the point, you are not a burden. You are a valued member of this household who has done nothing wrong. I will not let anyone make you feel otherwise." Lily looked up at him, at the absolute certainty in his dark eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. This man, this quiet, steadfast rancher who asked for so little and gave so much, had somehow become the safest place she had ever known, and she was terrified by how much that meant to her. "Thank you," she whispered. Fletcher's hands tightened on her shoulders briefly, then released her. "Go on inside and finish up in the kitchen, and Miss Carson, Lily, try not to worry, it will work out." But worry she did, and with good reason. Over the next 2 weeks it became clear that Robert Shaw had made good on his implied threat. Lily noticed it first when she went into town with Maria to buy supplies. The usual shopkeepers greeted her coolly, and more than once she caught people whispering behind their hands as she passed. "Mrs. Harper, who had been kind before, was now brisk and businesslike, barely making eye contact as she tallied up their purchases. When Maria tried to engage her in conversation, asking after her daughter who had been ill, Mrs. Harper gave short, distracted answers and clearly could not wait for them to leave. "What was that about?" Maria asked as they loaded supplies into the wagon. "Mr. Shaw," Lily said quietly. "He has been spreading his stories." Maria's expression darkened. "That vile man. He has no right to speak about you that way." "He has every right. It is a free country and gossip is not illegal. I just hope it does not cause problems for Fletcher. For Mr. Stone, I mean." "Fletcher will be fine," Maria said firmly. "He is respected around here. People know he is a good man." But even Maria's confidence faltered when Reverend Paulson paid a visit to the ranch a few days later. He arrived in the late afternoon, his expression grave, and asked to speak with Fletcher privately. They closeted themselves in Fletcher's study for nearly an hour, and when they emerged, Fletcher's face was like stone. Lily was preparing dinner when Fletcher came into the kitchen after the Reverend left. "What did he want?" she asked, though she already knew. "To share some concerns that had been brought to his attention. Apparently, several prominent members of the community have expressed dismay that I have employed a woman of questionable character. They fear it reflects poorly on the town and sets a bad example." "I see." Lily set down the knife she was using to chop vegetables, her hands unsteady. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that the people of Eureka need to find better things to worry about than my choice of housekeeper. I also told him that anyone who has actually met you and spoken with you would know that you are a woman of good character who has been treated unjustly. And I suggested that, as a man of God, he should be more concerned with showing Christian charity than with entertaining malicious gossip." Despite everything, Lily felt her lips twitch. "I imagine he did not care for that." "No, he did not, but he left, and that is what matters." Fletcher leaned against the counter, studying her. "Lily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. All right. Do you want to leave? Not because I am asking you to, but because staying here is making you miserable. Because if this situation is hurting you, if it is dragging up painful memories, or making you feel unsafe, then I need to know. Your well-being matters more than my need for a housekeeper." Lily considered the question seriously. Yes, the gossip hurt. Yes, it was frustrating to see the same pattern repeating itself, to watch people judge her based on lies and assumptions rather than her actual character. But for all that, she was not miserable. She loved this ranch, loved the work, loved the rhythm of her days. She loved Maria's friendship and the respectful way the hands treated her, and the quiet satisfaction of cooking a good meal and seeing it appreciated. And if she was being truly honest with herself, she loved the moments she spent with Fletcher. The brief conversations in the kitchen, the way he sometimes sought her opinion on household matters, the rare smile that transformed his stern face into something warm and almost boyish. She loved the way he made her feel safe and valued, as though her presence in his life was a gift rather than a burden. "No," she said finally. "I do not want to leave. This is the first place I have felt at home since my parents died, and the gossip hurts, but I have survived worse. I can survive this too as long as I know I am welcome here." "You are welcome here," Fletcher said firmly. "More than welcome. You belong here, Lily. I need you to know that." The intensity in his voice made her look up sharply, and for a moment their eyes locked. The air between them seemed to thicken with something unspoken, something that made Lily's heart race and her breath come short. She thought he might say more, might give voice to whatever was building between them, but then Tommy burst through the kitchen door, breathless and excited about a mare that was about to foal, and the moment shattered. The gossip continued, but Lily held her head high and refused to be driven away. She went to town less frequently, but when she did go, she met the whispers and cold stares with quiet dignity. She knew who she was, and she knew she had done nothing wrong. If people chose to believe lies about her, that was their failure, not hers. Fletcher, for his part, became even more protective. He made a point of accompanying her to town whenever possible, his presence a clear statement that he stood by his decision to employ her. When they attended the Sunday service, Fletcher sat in his usual pew and waited until Lily was seated before sitting beside her, ignoring the shocked whispers that rippled through the congregation. It was a small thing, perhaps, but to Lily it meant everything. He was publicly aligning himself with her, claiming her as part of his household in a way that could not be misinterpreted. She was under his protection, and everyone in Eureka now knew it. The turning point came on a hot September afternoon when a group of women from the church's ladies' auxiliary showed up at the ranch. Lily was in the garden, wrestling with stubborn weeds, when she heard the sound of approaching wagons. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirts, and watched as 5 women climbed down and arranged themselves in a semicircle near the main house. Mrs. Paulson was among them, looking uncomfortable. The others Lily recognized from church, including Mrs. Harper and a stern older woman named Mrs. Blackwell, who seemed to lead every social organization in Eureka. "May I help you, ladies?" Lily asked, walking toward them with her chin up. "We have come to speak with Mr. Stone," Mrs. Blackwell announced. "It is a matter of some delicacy. Mr. Stone is out with the herd. He will not be back until evening. If there is a message I can relay, I would be happy to do so. We prefer to speak with him directly. We will wait." Lily considered arguing, then decided it was not worth it. "I will bring out some refreshments. You can wait on the porch where there is shade." She brought out lemonade and cookies, served with impeccable courtesy, then retreated to the kitchen to watch through the window and wonder what this delegation wanted. Nothing good, certainly. Fletcher returned 2 hours later, dusty and tired. Lily met him as he was unsaddling his horse. "There are women from the church waiting on the porch," she said quietly. "They have been here for hours. They want to speak with you about something delicate, which I assume means they want to speak about me." Fletcher's expression darkened. "How long have they been here?" "Since mid-afternoon." He handed her his horse's reins without a word and strode toward the house. Lily quickly tended to the horse, then positioned herself near an open window where she could hear what was being said. "Ladies," Fletcher's voice carried clearly, "to what do I owe this visit, Mrs.?" Blackwell launched into a prepared speech about the moral standards of the community and the responsibility that prominent citizens like Fletcher had to set a good example. She spoke about the importance of reputation and propriety, and how Fletcher's continued employment of that woman was causing scandal and distress among the good people of Eureka. "That woman has a name," Fletcher interrupted. "Miss Carson. Use it." Mrs. Blackwell bristled but complied. "Miss Carson's past is a matter of public record. The scandal in Carson City was widely reported. For you to bring her here, to house her on your property and present her to the community as though she were a respectable woman, is an affront to decent society. What exactly was Miss Carson's crime?" Fletcher asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "She attempted to entrap the son of a prominent family. That is the story that family told. Miss Carson's version, which I believe, is that she was assaulted and then slandered when she refused to stay silent. But let us say, for the sake of argument, that you are correct. Let us say Miss Carson did something inappropriate. Does that mean she deserves to be unemployable, to be driven from town to town, to never have a chance at a decent life? She made her choices, Mrs. Harper said, though she sounded less certain than Mrs. Blackwell. "Did she?" Fletcher's voice rose slightly. Did she choose to be orphaned at 16? Did she choose to have no family to protect her? Did she choose to be vulnerable to the whims of wealthy men who could ruin her reputation with a word? Because from where I am standing, Miss Carson has been dealt a terrible hand, and she has played it with more grace and dignity than most people could manage. That is all very sympathetic, Mrs. Blackwell said coldly, but it does not change the fact that her presence here is inappropriate. You are an unmarried man, Mr. Stone. She is an unmarried woman. There are no other women living in the main house to provide proper oversight. The situation invites scandal. Maria Ortega lives on the property. Mrs. Ortega has her own household to manage. She cannot be expected to chaperone you every moment. Chaperone me? Fletcher's laugh was harsh. Mrs. Blackwell, I am 30 years old and the owner of this ranch. I do not require a chaperone. And the suggestion that I would behave inappropriately toward a woman in my employ is insulting. We are not suggesting you have done anything wrong, Mrs. Paulson interjected quickly. Only that the appearance of impropriety is damaging. People talk, Mr. Stone. You must be aware of the gossip. I am aware. I simply do not care. Miss Carson is an excellent housekeeper and cook. She works hard, treats everyone with respect, and has brought order to a household that badly needed it. Her personal history is none of my concern, and it should not be yours either. So you refuse to dismiss her? Mrs. Blackwell's voice was sharp. I absolutely refuse. Then you leave us no choice. The ladies' auxiliary will be meeting to discuss appropriate measures. It may be necessary to encourage people to limit their business dealings with you until you see reason. Fletcher was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than Lily had ever heard it. Let me make something very clear, ladies. You can gossip all you like. You can refuse to do business with me, though I suspect your husbands will have something to say about that, since I am one of the larger ranchers in this area. You can ostracize me from your church socials and your quilting bees and whatever other gatherings you think I cannot live without. But you will not drive Miss Carson away from this ranch. She has a place here for as long as she wants it, and nothing you say or do will change that. Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do. There was a flurry of shocked exclamations and rustling skirts as the ladies departed. Lily stepped away from the window, her heart pounding. She heard Fletcher's boots on the floorboards, heard the door slam, and then silence. She found him on the porch, leaning against the railing and staring out at the land with an expression of frustrated anger. You should not have done that, Lily said softly. Fletcher glanced at her. Should not have done what? Defended me so strongly. You have just made enemies of some of the most influential women in Eureka. They will make good on their threats, Fletcher. You could lose business, lose standing in the community. I do not care, but I care. I care that you are suffering consequences for showing me kindness. I care that you are being punished for doing nothing wrong. Lily moved to stand beside him at the railing. You have already given me so much. You took me in when no one else would, gave me work and shelter and treated me with respect. You defended my honor to Robert Shaw and to Reverend Paulson and now to those women. You have done enough, Fletcher. More than enough. It is not enough until you are safe, Fletcher said quietly. Until you can live your life without being hounded by people who should know better. That might never happen. Some stains do not wash out, no matter how unjust they are. Fletcher turned to face her fully, and there was something in his eyes that made Lily's breath catch. Then we will make a new life where the old stains do not matter. How, marry me? The words hung in the air between them, impossible and perfect and terrifying all at once. Lily stared at him, certain she had misheard. What, marry me? Fletcher repeated. It is the only way to end this. As my wife, You would be beyond reproach. No one could question your place here, and the gossip would die down eventually. We would be respectable, and you would be safe." "That is not a reason to marry someone," Lily said, though her heart was racing so fast she felt dizzy. "You do not marry someone out of pity or obligation." "Is that what you think this is? Pity? What else could it be? You hired me because I reminded you of your sister. You have been protecting me because you feel guilty about not protecting her. This is just an extension of that." Fletcher took her hands, his grip firm and warm. "Lily, I am not a man who makes impulsive decisions. I think things through carefully before I act. So believe me when I say I have thought about this about you more than I probably should have. You are right that I hired you partly because of Sarah, because I did not want to stand by and watch another woman suffer when I had the power to help. But that is not why I want to marry you." "Then why?" Lily whispered. "Because in the 2 months you have been here, you have become essential to my life in ways that have nothing to do with cooking and cleaning. Because I look forward to meals not because the food is good, though it is, but because it means I get to spend time with you. Because when something happens during the day, interesting or frustrating or amusing, my first thought is that I want to tell you about it. Because when I saw those women on my porch, tearing you down and making you into something you are not, I wanted to protect you not out of obligation, but because the thought of anyone hurting you makes me furious." He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. "Because I am falling in love with you, Lily, and I think I have been since the moment I saw you on that bench in town looking lost and determined all at once." Lily felt tears spill down her cheeks. "You do not know what you are saying. You do not know me, not really. I am damaged goods, Fletcher. That is what people will always see when they look at me." "Then they are fools," Fletcher said fiercely. "I see a woman who has survived things that would have broken most people. I see someone who works harder than anyone I know, who treats my men with kindness, who brought life back to this house just by being in it. I see someone brave and strong and beautiful, and I count myself lucky every day that you chose to stay when you had every reason to leave." "I am afraid," Lily admitted. "Afraid that you will regret this. Afraid that one day you will wake up and realize you settled for someone broken when you could have had anyone. You are not broken, and I am not settling." Fletcher lifted one hand to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away her tears. "I am choosing you, Lily, not out of pity or obligation or guilt, but because I want to spend my life with you. Because when I think about my future, you are in every part of it. If you need time to think about it, I understand, but know that my offer stands for as long as you need." Lily leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, she saw the truth of his words written in his expression. He meant every word. This strong, steady man who had already given her so much was offering her everything. "I do not need time," she said. "I have been falling in love with you too, Fletcher. I tried to tell myself it was foolish and impossible and that you could never feel the same way. But yes, I will marry you." Fletcher's face transformed with a smile so genuine and joyful that Lily felt her heart might burst. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and let herself believe, finally, that she had found home. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony in the main house with Sam and Maria as witnesses. Lily wore a new dress that Maria had helped her sew, pale blue cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Fletcher wore his best suit and looked so handsome that Lily could hardly believe this was real. Reverend Paulson performed the ceremony with visible reluctance, clearly uncomfortable but unable to refuse when Fletcher had made the request in front of witnesses. The ladies' auxiliary had indeed made good on their threats, and Fletcher's business dealings had suffered somewhat, but not as much as they had hoped. Most of the ranchers and businessmen in the area were practical people who valued Fletcher's integrity and fair dealing more than they cared about social gossip. When the ceremony concluded, and Fletcher kissed her for the first time as his wife, Lily felt years of pain and uncertainty fall away. She was no longer alone. She no longer had to carry her burdens by herself. She had a partner, a home, a future. The ranch hands threw an impromptu celebration that evening with fiddle music and dancing in the barn. Dutch produced a jug of whiskey from some hidden supply, and even Pete, normally gruff and taciturn, made a toast about how it was about time someone civilized the boss. Tommy, who had clearly been nursing a harmless crush on Lily, was gracious in his congratulations and only looked a little heartbroken. Maria hugged Lily tightly and whispered in her ear, "I am so happy for you. Fletcher is a good man and he deserves a good woman. You will be happy together." "I hope so," Lily whispered back. "I know so. I have seen the way he looks at you. That man is besotted." Later that night, after the celebration had wound down and the ranch had settled into quiet, Fletcher took Lily's hand and led her to the main house. She had moved her few belongings from the cabin earlier that day, but it still felt strange and wonderful to walk through the door as the mistress of the house rather than the hired help. "Are you tired?" Fletcher asked, his voice gentle. "A little. It has been quite a day. Would you like some time to yourself? I can sleep in the spare room if you prefer." Lily turned to face him, taking in the careful consideration in his expression, the way he was trying so hard not to pressure her. This man, who had already proven himself in so many ways, was still thinking of her comfort before his own desires. "Fletcher," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face, "we are married. I want to be your wife in every way, unless you would rather wait." "I would not rather wait," Fletcher admitted, his voice rough, "but only if you are certain." "I am certain." He kissed her then, deeper and more passionately than the chaste kiss they had shared during the ceremony. Lily responded with equal fervor, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. "I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Lily promised. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a revelation of intimacy that Lily had never imagined possible. Fletcher was patient and gentle, attentive to her needs, and when they finally came together fully, Lily felt as though some missing piece of herself had clicked into place. She belonged to him, and he belonged to her, and nothing could change that. In the days and weeks that followed, Lily settled into her new role as Fletcher's wife with a joy that sometimes overwhelmed her. Her daily routine changed little. She still cooked and cleaned and managed the household, but now she did it as a partner rather than an employee. Fletcher consulted her on decisions about the ranch, valued her opinions, and treated her as an equal in all things. The gossip in town gradually died down, replaced by new scandals and concerns. Some people remained coldly disapproving, but others, seeing that the marriage was genuine and that Fletcher clearly adored his wife, softened their stance. Mrs. Paulson apologized privately to Lily one Sunday after church, admitting that she had allowed herself to be swayed by gossip when she should have trusted her own judgment. "You were always kind and hardworking when you stayed with us," she said. "I am sorry I did not defend you when I should have." "Thank you," Lily said, meaning it. "That means a great deal." Even Mrs. Harper thawed eventually, particularly after Lily helped her daughter through a difficult pregnancy the following spring. Lily had learned some nursing skills from caring for her own mother and various employers over the years, and she sat with the young woman through 3 days of difficult labor, helping the doctor and offering comfort and encouragement. When the baby was finally born healthy and whole, Mrs. Harper embraced Lily with tears in her eyes and thanked her for saving her daughter. After that, Lily found herself slowly being welcomed into the community. It was not universal. Some people would always believe the worst, but it was enough. She had friends now beyond Maria. She had a place in the world, but the greatest joy came from her marriage itself. Fletcher proved to be exactly the kind of husband she had always dreamed of, steady and kind, hardworking, and devoted. He made her laugh with his dry humor, supported her when memories of the past threatened to overwhelm her, and loved her with a constancy that still sometimes made her marvel. In the spring of 1883, nearly a year after their wedding, Lily realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but wanted to be certain before she said anything. When the doctor confirmed it, she rode back to the ranch with her heart singing. She found Fletcher in the barn, working on repairing a saddle. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting up the way it always did when he saw her. "How was town?" he asked, productive. Lily moved to stand beside him, suddenly nervous. "Fletcher, I have something to tell you." He set down the saddle immediately, giving her his full attention. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. In fact, something is very right." She took his hands in hers. "I saw Dr. Miller today. I am pregnant, Fletcher. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Fletcher simply stared at her, processing the information. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen, and he swept her up in his arms, spinning her around in a circle before setting her down carefully as though she might break. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Lily, that is the best news I have ever heard." "You are happy." "Happy. I am ecstatic. I am terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can hardly stand it." He kissed her thoroughly, then pulled back to look at her with concern. "Are you feeling all right? Does the doctor say everything is progressing well? What do you need?" "Should you be resting?" Lily laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I am fine. Healthy and strong, according to Dr. Miller. The baby should arrive in late October or early November." "We need to prepare," Fletcher said immediately. "Set up a nursery, get baby things. Does Maria know?" "She will have advice. She has been through this 3 times. And we should hire someone to help you with the heavy work around the house. I do not want you overexerting yourself." "Fletcher, breathe," Lily said, amused by his sudden agitation. "We have months to prepare, and I am not fragile. I can still do my work." "I know you are not fragile, but you are carrying our child, and I am going to take care of you whether you like it or not." He was true to his word. Over the following months, Fletcher fussed over Lily in ways that were sometimes annoying but mostly endearing. He hired a young woman from town to help with the heavy cleaning and laundry. He insisted Lily rest every afternoon. He brought her books from town and wildflowers from the range and once, memorably, a rocking chair that he had made himself for the nursery. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Lily felt healthy and strong, her body changing in ways that fascinated and sometimes frightened her, but always with Fletcher there to reassure her that everything would be all right. Maria was indeed a font of advice and support, sharing her own experiences and helping Lily prepare for the realities of childbirth and motherhood. In early November, on a crisp morning when the first snow was threatening in the mountains, Lily went into labor. It was long and difficult, 12 hours of pain and exhaustion that tested her strength to its limits. Fletcher stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement even when she screamed at him to be quiet. Finally, As the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, their son was born. He was perfect, small and red-faced and squalling with indignation at being thrust into the cold world. Dr. Miller cleaned him up and placed him in Lily's arms, and she looked down at this tiny human she and Fletcher had created and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "A boy," Fletcher said, his voice thick with emotion. He touched the baby's tiny fist with one finger and the baby immediately grasped it. "He is perfect, Lily. You did so well. I am so proud of you." "We did well," Lily corrected, looking up at her husband with tears streaming down her face. "We made this together." They named him James Henry Stone, after both their fathers. Jamie, they called him, and from the moment he arrived, he became the center of their world. He was a good baby, relatively calm except when hungry, and he grew quickly under Lily's attentive care. Fletcher was a devoted father, spending every free moment with his son. Lily would often find him in the nursery late at night, rocking Jamie and singing to him in a low, rumbling voice that had no business attempting lullabies, but somehow worked anyway. The ranch hands were equally smitten. Tommy carved wooden toys for the baby. Pete, crusty old Pete who claimed to hate children, could often be found making silly faces at Jamie to elicit a smile. Even the cattle seemed to sense there was a new life on the ranch, and were, in Fletcher's words, probably behaving better than usual out of respect. Lily had never been happier. She had everything she had never dared to dream of having: a home, a husband who loved her, a child, friends, and a place in the community. On difficult days, when old memories threatened to surface, or when she caught sight of people in town who still looked at her with judgment, she would remind herself of how far she had come. From that desperate woman on a bench in Eureka to this, wife and mother and valued member of society, the journey had been long and painful, but worth every step. Jamie grew from infant to toddler, and the ranch continued to prosper. Fletcher expanded their herd, hired more hands, and built a new barn. Lily started a proper garden that produced vegetables throughout the growing season, and she began selling her preserves and pickles in town, earning a reputation as an excellent cook that had nothing to do with her past. When Jamie was 2, Lily discovered she was pregnant again. This time a daughter arrived, born in the spring of 1886 with her mother's delicate features and her father's dark eyes. They named her Sarah, for Fletcher's lost sister, and she was a determined, willful child from the start. "She is going to be trouble," Fletcher said fondly, watching his daughter throw a magnificent tantrum at 6 months old because Lily had taken away a rock she was trying to eat. "She is strong-willed," Lily corrected. "That is not the same as trouble," says the woman who refused to give up even when the entire world seemed set against her. Fair point. 2 more children followed over the years, another son named Thomas and a second daughter named Grace. The house that had once seemed too large for just Fletcher rattled and rang with the chaos of family life. There were skinned knees to bandage and quarrels to mediate and endless meals to prepare and mountains of laundry to wash. There were bad years when the cattle prices dropped and good years when they thrived. There were illnesses and injuries and moments of genuine fear, but through it all, there was love. The kind of deep, abiding love that Lily had never believed she deserved. Fletcher never wavered in his devotion to her, and she loved him more with each passing year. They built a life together that was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. On a warm evening in the summer of 1895, Lily stood on the porch of the ranch house and watched her family. Jamie, now 12, was teaching Thomas to rope a fence post. Sarah and Grace were picking wildflowers in the yard, arguing companionably about which colors were prettiest. And Fletcher was walking up from the barn, his stride as steady and sure as it had been the first day she met him, now heading home to the family they had built together. He climbed the porch steps and put his arm around Lily's waist, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," Lily said. "How different my life is from what I thought it would be. How lucky I am." "I am the lucky one," Fletcher countered. "You took a chance on a rough rancher who barely knew how to talk to a woman, let alone court one properly. You courted me just fine. You saw me when no one else would. You took my burden and made it lighter just by being willing to share it." "Your burdens have always been my burdens," Fletcher said simply. "That is what love is." Lily leaned into him, watching their children play in the golden light of evening, and felt the last shadows of her past finally fade away. She was no longer that desperate woman with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. She was Lily Stone, wife and mother, beloved and secure. And if her story could teach anything, it was this: that sometimes the people who seem the most broken are simply the ones who have survived the most. That judgment is easy, but compassion is brave. And that the right person at the right time can change everything, not by fixing what is broken, but by loving it anyway. Fletcher kissed the top of her head. "Come on, let us get these children fed before they start eating the wildflowers." Lily laughed and let him lead her inside, into the warmth and chaos of the home they had made together. Behind them, the sun set over the Nevada hills, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, blessing another day in a life that had turned out far better than she had ever dared to hope. Years continued to pass in a peaceful rhythm. Jamie grew into a fine young man who shared his father's skill with cattle and horses. At 18, he announced his intention to court the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and Fletcher and Lily watched with amusement as their serious oldest son fumbled his way through first love. The wedding came 2 years later, and within another year, Lily became a grandmother for the first time. Sarah proved to be as stubborn and determined as her parents had predicted. She shocked everyone by declaring she wanted to become a teacher, and she studied relentlessly to pass the examination. By 20, she was teaching at the schoolhouse in Eureka, earning respect and admiration for her dedication to her students. Thomas took after his father in temperament, quiet and steady, with a gift for understanding animals that made him invaluable on the ranch. Grace, the youngest, was the family's ray of sunshine, always laughing and singing and finding joy in the smallest things. Fletcher and Lily grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming more weathered with work and time. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened with each shared experience, each challenge faced together, each quiet evening spent on the porch watching the sunset. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Fletcher surprised Lily with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had left Nevada in years, and they spent a week exploring the city like young lovers, eating in fine restaurants, attending the theater, and walking hand in hand along the waterfront. "You ever regret it?" Lily asked one evening as they watched the sun set over the Pacific. "Choosing me, I mean. Your life would have been simpler if you had married someone without my history." Fletcher turned to her with the same steady gaze that had captured her heart 20 years earlier. "My life would have been emptier. Simpler means nothing if you are not happy. And you, Lily Stone, have made me happier than I ever imagined possible. Even when the children were small and the house was chaos and I was exhausted all the time, especially then. Though I admit, I also appreciate this stage where they are mostly grown and we can take trips like this." They returned to the ranch refreshed and ready for whatever came next. The ranch continued to thrive under their management, and Fletcher began slowly turning over more responsibilities to Jamie, preparing him to take over completely one day. In the summer of 1902, 20 years after Lily had first stumbled into Eureka looking for work, she stood in almost the same spot and marveled at how much had changed. The town had grown considerably. The railroad had come through, bringing new businesses and new people. Some of the old faces were gone, replaced by newcomers who knew nothing of ancient scandals and old gossip. Mrs. Harper had passed away a few years back, but before she died, she had sought out Lily and apologized again for her initial coldness. "You are a good woman," she had said, her voice weak but sincere. "I am sorry it took me so long to see it." Even Mrs. Blackwell, ancient and fierce as ever, had softened somewhat over the years. She still did not approve of much, but she acknowledged that Lily had proven herself to be a woman of good character. It was not effusive praise, but from Mrs. Blackwell, it was practically a declaration of friendship. Lily had become one of the most respected women in Eureka. She served on the church committee, organized fundraisers for the school, and was known throughout the county for her kindness and her ability to organize anything from a barn raising to a wedding. Young women sought her advice, and she gave it freely, always mindful of her own difficult past and determined to help others avoid the same struggles. But it was not public respect that mattered most to Lily. It was the private joys, the quiet moments of connection with the people she loved. It was Fletcher's hand finding hers across the dinner table. It was her children's laughter echoing through the house. It was the grandchildren who climbed into her lap demanding stories. It was Maria's continued friendship, as strong after 20 years as it had been in the beginning. On a cool October evening in 1905, Lily and Fletcher sat together on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. All 4 of their children were married now, building their own lives, though Jamie and his family still lived on the ranch and helped with the work. The house was quieter than it had been in years, and while Lily sometimes missed the chaos of raising young children, she also appreciated the peace. "You remember the day we met?" Fletcher asked suddenly. "Of course." "I was sitting outside the saloon feeling sorry for myself, convinced my life was over. You said you were a burden everywhere you went, and you said to burden you that you were strong." Lily smiled at the memory. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to me. It was also the truth. "You were never a burden, Lily. You were a gift. You still are." "We have had a good life, have we not?" Lily said softly. "The best life," Fletcher agreed. "And it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us." He was right. They had another decade together, watching their family continue to grow and expand. They saw their children become parents and their grandchildren start to grow up. They witnessed Eureka transform from a rough frontier town into a proper community. They weathered hard winters and dry summers and market fluctuations, and all the other challenges that came with ranching life. Through it all, they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense of the word. When Fletcher passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1916, at the age of 64, Lily mourned him with a grief that was deep and real, but also touched with gratitude. They had had 34 years together, 34 years of love and partnership, and building something beautiful out of what had seemed like ruins. At his funeral, attended by what seemed like half of Nevada, Lily stood surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and she spoke about the man Fletcher had been. Not just to her, though she spoke of that too, but to everyone who had known him. His fairness, his integrity, his quiet strength, his unwavering commitment to doing what was right rather than what was easy. "He saved my life," Lily said simply. not by grand gestures or heroic acts, but by seeing me when I was invisible, by believing in me when no one else did, and by loving me not despite my past, but simply because of who I was. He taught me that burdens shared become lighter, that love is action, not just feeling, and that home is not a place, but the people you choose to stand beside. She lived another 8 years after Fletcher's death, remaining on the ranch that had become the center of her world. Jamie ran the operation now, but Lily was still involved, still offering advice and keeping the books and cooking Sunday dinners for the entire family. She watched her family continue to grow and thrive, saw her grandchildren marry and have children of their own, witnessed the world change in ways both wonderful and terrifying. The automobile replaced horses in town, the Great War came and went, and the frontier that had defined so much of her youth faded into history. But some things remained constant: family, love, the importance of seeing people for who they truly are rather than judging them by their worst moments. The power of one person choosing to extend kindness when it would have been easier to turn away. On a warm June day in 1924, Lily passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family, in the same house where she had built her life with Fletcher. She was 70 years old, and had lived to see things she never could have imagined when she was that desperate young woman stumbling into Eureka with nothing but a carpet bag and a world of hurt. At her funeral, her children and grandchildren spoke about her strength, her kindness, her cooking, her laugh, and her unwavering love for all of them. But it was Sarah, now a respected educator and grandmother herself, who perhaps said it best. "My mother taught us that our past does not define our future. That being broken does not mean being worthless. That love is not something you earn through perfection, but something you accept as a gift and then give back to the world as generously as you can." She was rejected and judged and cast aside by people who should have known better, but she never let that make her bitter. Instead, she became the kind of person who saw others struggling and reached out a hand, the way my father once reached out his hand to her. Sarah paused, her eyes bright with tears. She used to tell us that the day she met our father was the day her life truly began, but I think the truth is that her life was always remarkable. My father just helped her see it. Lily was buried next to Fletcher on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Lily Carson Stone, 1854–1924. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she carried her burdens with grace and taught us all how to love." The ranch continued to operate for generations, passed down through the family, and the story of Fletcher and Lily became family legend. Great-great-grandchildren who never knew them would hear the tale of how their ancestor had stumbled into Eureka with nothing, and built an empire of love through sheer determination, and one man's willingness to see her worth. And in Eureka itself, though the town continued to change and grow and eventually fade as the mining industry declined and people moved away, there were still those who remembered, who told stories about the woman who had been cast aside by society but found her place anyway, who spoke of the rancher who had chosen love over reputation and had never once regretted it, because in the end, that was the real legacy of Lily and Fletcher Stone, not the ranch they built or the children they raised or even the years they spent together. It was the simple, revolutionary act of choosing to see the humanity in another person when the world said they were not worth seeing, of offering strength when someone needed to lean on it, of sharing burdens because that is what love does. She had said she was a burden everywhere she went. He had taken her hand and said, "Then burden me, I'm strong." And from that one moment of grace, an entire life had bloomed, not perfect, Never perfect, but real and rich and full of the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. That was the story. That was the legacy. And long after the ranch had passed out of family hands, long after the last person who remembered them had died, the story remained, passed down as a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. That everyone carries burdens, and the measure of a good life is not whether you carry them alone, but whether you find someone willing to help bear the weight. Fletcher and Lily had found each other at exactly the right moment. Two people who needed each other in ways neither fully understood at the time. And from that unlikely beginning, they had built something extraordinary, a life of love and partnership that touched everyone around them and rippled out into the future in ways they could never have anticipated. It was, in the end, exactly the kind of story that the Wild West was made for. Rough and beautiful, difficult and rewarding, filled with hardship and joy in equal measure. And at its heart, like all the best stories, it was about two people who chose to face the world together and found that they were stronger for it. The sun set over the Nevada hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, just as it had on countless evenings throughout their lives. And if you listened closely on the wind, you might almost hear the echo of a love that had endured every test and emerged victorious. Then burden me, I'm strong. 4 simple words that had changed everything. 4 simple words that had proven love could grow in even the hardest soil, as long as someone was willing to plant the seed and tend it with patience and faith. 4 simple words that had built a legacy lasting far beyond one couple's lifetime. And in the end, what more could anyone ask for than that?